Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week we continue our foray into .hack with .hack roots. And as we saw with .hack sign and .hack IMOQ, or the quadrilogy, this is a show that keeps going and keeps trying new things and at least tries to build on itself in different ways, while still maintaining a certain formula. And while I said don't reach out for stuff like Legend of Twilight Bracelet, there are still things that I remember some commenters making light of. .hack Link, .hack Liminality, which was part of the quadrilogy part. .hack Link was its own separate thing. There was also manga and other things as well. The entirety of .hack is quite big. It's not just these two anime, it's not just these two games. There's quite a bit of material, and some of it may be more to your liking than others. They even made a short film based on some of the stuff that you'll see in GU in the story. Not quite near enough, to be honest, but again, there is a lot. There is a lot of stuff. But as far as today's purposes, we are going to talk about .hack roots. Now, as I said, when I was recording .hack sign, I was going through .hack roots along with it. And there are things I like about roots, and there are things that don't hold up as well as sign. And it isn't just recency bias or favoritism to sign. There are definitely some things that work against roots quite a bit. And I think it has to do more with the way they go about telling the story and the characters involved therein. That being said, I do have a higher fondness for GU than I do the original quadrilogy, but again, that shows the storytelling involved with the GU games instead, as we'll see. But I will allude to GU, and I'll definitely have to allude to the main character, Haseo, quite a bit, and I will go as far as like what Roots does that references GU, but I won't go into GU and its spoilers until next week. But suffice it to say, a lot of stuff changes and a lot of things do move around it. The concept of the World Revision 2 is the data that, like the data source code. That's what they call it. The source code for the original game was lost in a fire. So they took a steampunk game they were developing, mixed it in with what they had with the world, and then turned it into World Revision 2. So rather than a medieval fantasy setting, you've got sort of a steampunk aesthetic for this game. And again, it has its own lore and shit, but that's merely a backdrop to the characters themselves. Much like Sign was, Roots is rooted, I suppose, for lack of a better term, in the characters and their journey. Unfortunately, that doesn't come across as well in this version because they do a lot more like subterfuge and mystery finding, and this is more of like a sort of detective thing for the first little bit of things, and then it's still a character study, but it's not as like rooted in why is this character dealing with this and why are they so important. Haseo is kind of a bit player in his own story, which really kind of makes this suck because, as I said with Tsukasa, he's not the most likable character, but Tsukasa has the main driving plot point, so you understand why he's so important. And it's not until GU that Haseo's real important shines. So, as watching Roots, you're kind of sitting there going, this is less than. But it still has some things that I enjoy about it. One being the fact that, unlike almost every other anime, this was dubbed in Canada. So, Viz Media is based in Canada. I think it's Ocean Studios, at last I remember. They don't dub a lot of stuff. At most, they dub one or two shows. I think they did Dead Rising. They did X-Men Evolution, stuff like that. Definitely, like, their high-profile one was Inuyasha and Death Note, but they've done stuff like Black Lagoon. Anytime they do, it's pretty good, and I like the actors there, but you're not going to have me have a spiel about who they are and what they've done because they don't do a lot. The most you'll hear me talk about is, hey, this person was in Inuyasha, or this person was in Black Lagoon, stuff like that. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time going over it. But suffice to say, I did watch the dub version back, and I did enjoy it because, I still remember, like, this streamer I know mentioned this idea where the less you know about an actor, the less you're hearing that actor, and the more you're hearing the character inside them, which I suppose makes sense. And again, I've said that before, but that's a neat thing. And again, I don't have to stress over who's the actor, what they do, and all that stuff. I can focus in on the characters this time. There are going to be spoilers, but only tied to Roots. And then we'll get into GU spoilers once we do GU. But again, much like .hack Sign, this is a prequel to the games itself. That being said, it does feature a lot more of the characters that you will see in GU, so it does have that going for it. But as I said, the characters are important, and the main character is Haseo. And Haseo's problematic because he's both a character from the original game and not really. The prevailing theory, which is, I believe, been confirmed, not really, but sort of confirmed, is the fact that he's actually Sora's older counterpart. He's basically Sora from like 4 or 5 years later, and he doesn't remember he's Sora or was Sora or data drained or anything like that. And I can see it in his character, especially in GU. Not so much in Roots, but I could definitely see it in GU because Haseo is unlikable. Think of Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. He's an observer to all the stuff around him, but he doesn't really, like, he's supposedly this super powered guy, and he doesn't really do much. He just gets kind of dragged along with whatever other people decide for him because they think he's the key to everything, which he is. But it's like, unlike Tsukasa, who has that main driving thing, and as I said before, it's like, why are you here? Really, his main motivation was he walked into the world and he got PK'd. He got taken down by a couple of people from a guild that specialized in getting rid of players just for shits and giggles. Because the World Revision 2 said, hey, we'll do PvP and PKs, we'll do that more often and it'll be fun, and it turns to be such of a dick move, kind of. And outside of that, you're sitting here going, well, why is this guy so important? And again, you see bits and pieces, but he's more of what's considered a viewpoint character than somebody you want to root for or somebody you care about. And Andrew Francis specifically, and I would say Yuri Lowenthal in the game, make him unlikable. And he's meant to be unlikable. And again, do you like characters that are meant to be assholes, or do you just hate them because they're dicks to people? Andrew Francis is more of the Squall, like, whatever, fuck off. That sort of standoffish. Yuri Lowenthal portrays him a bit more of a dick because you're around him a lot more. And again, there's no wrong way to do it. Haseo is meant to be unlikable, and his journey is he's less of a dick as stuff goes on. But as a main character, you don't really want to root for this guy. You really don't give a fuck what his whole thing is and what the fascination is between all of the other people, because he gets recruited by 2 different factions. The Twilight Brigade, who is searching for the key of the Twilight, and unlike the members of .hack Sign, are actively searching for it and have been for a long time. And Tan, which is this kind of like high-end guild merchantry thing that's kind of running everything, but in the background is being observed. And they know that Haseo is important, but they also know that the people in the Twilight Brigade is important. So Haseo has to decide, okay, do I join this or do I join that? And the reason he joins the Twilight Brigade is 2 reasons. He joins because of a character known as Ovon, who saved his life from the PKs, and is just this... Think of that hidden, charismatic guy who's just enigmatic and yet personable. It's the weirdest thing. He's off in his own little world, and as the games will tell you, has his own agenda, and yet when he speaks, and he's rarely around and rarely speaks, but Ovon has this just imposing figure, and yet this warmth to him. It's almost insane. And whether it's Michael Kopsa in the anime, or especially for me, Jameson Price in the game, he does come across as this warm individual, but you know behind the fact there's something that the game is not telling you, because this guy is big, this guy is not mean, but he's just like, he uses and manipulates the world around him to suit his needs. And that includes his friends, I would suppose. Not because he's malevolent in any way, it's just he has his own mission. Again, not shown off in Roots, but you can tell that he's kind of off in his own world, letting Shino do her own thing and leading the guild, even though Ovon is the leader of it. So Shino is the kind of backbone of this entire franchise, because Haseo's a bit of a standoffish jerk, and Ovon's kind of off in this weird thing. And if you only play the games, you don't really get the essence of why Shino's important. But Shino plays a pivotal part in this game, is kind of the main reason why anyone like Haseo is kind of into her, you know. She is much like Subaru. She is committed to a cause, and in this cause, following Ovon to find this key of the Twilight thing. But she is devoted, almost motherly in that aspect, and it's kind of striking just how crazy, like, her love of Ovon and Haseo's love for her kind of creates this, like, inadvertent love triangle, and she kind of knows it, and she knows, and she's playful about it, too. But she also has the responsibility of, Ovon's not here because he's doing his own fucking thing, but he's still the leader of the thing. Shino has to be kind of the crux of the narrative, while Haseo is being built up as the main character. Shino's really the one doing all the legwork. So that's why I like her a lot. And you get a lot of time to see Shino kind of building that bridge between Ovon and Haseo, and then Haseo starts to fall for her. And she sort of knows it, but doesn't act upon it. It's weird. She knows that there's this interest, and she doesn't really want to fall for him. And I like that, because in a lot of shows you'd have the thing where they fall for each other almost completely, and you just know that they just go for it. There's this reticence that's there for episodes upon episodes, and you're just like, you know, like they're teasing it, but they don't go overboard, which makes it all the more important when shit goes south, which I'll get to in a minute. But the early episodes are not even about that. They're about building the Twilight Brigade and building some other characters. You've got Saki Saka, this guy who's just kind of, why the fuck am I even part of this party? Well, that's a good question. If you're written to be, why the fuck do I care about this party? Well, why the fuck are you here? And then Tabby, who is just gung-ho about everything, is basically, I like Shino a lot, and Saki Saka is a bit of a jerk, but he's a nice jerk, unlike Haseo, who's not. But Shino is the likable person. Tabby's just the energetic life of the party, and Shino recruited her, and Tabby just tries to be everybody's friend and do everything right. And those 5 people are just trying to find this key of the Twilight thing, even though everybody else, including former members that get shown in the show, are telling people, dude, this is a fake. This is a stupid idea. Stop looking for this fucking thing. It's dumb. Including the other main character, Philo. And Philo's whole thing is he's a beast character. So you have, like, your human characters, and they have their own physical designs. Beastmen are kind of like, either they're human-sized, they're gigantic, or in most cases, they're, like, really teeny tiny, like dwarfs. Sort of thing, with beastmen faces and tails and stuff like that. So Philo is this kind of older guy / informant. He's kind of an urban legend in Makanu. He sits there and just sits there and talks and talks and talks, and yet he's very powerful because he's just an older guy who visits the world on his own time, and he's ready to just lend an ear to people. And he is kind of that guy who tries to tell Haseo and others, like, either get your shit together and do what you want to do, or he will offer the advice and say, okay, well, what is it you want to do? I'm not here to do anything because I'm an old stupid fool. What do you want me to do about it? You know, that sort of like snooty but caring older guy that is just giving people stuff to think about. And his importance is, well, he gives people that extra push to do the stuff in the episodes, whether it's, okay, do I join Tan or do I join the Twilight Brigade or do I keep going looking for this fucking mess? Excuse me. Or do I keep following Ovon despite the fact that Ovon is clearly not invested in my shit? You know, that sort of vibe. As far as antagonists go, you have 3 specifically, and Tan is the important one. Tan is this crazy high-end guild in .hack roots, and they're run by Tawalaya, this merchant dude who just understands everything, but is kind of still led by Naobi and Ender. And Naobi and Ender have their own sort of thing going on. So Tawalaya is the face of the organization, but Naobi and Ender are what are known as system administrators. Why did I say that word? System administrators. Yay! Words. But Naobi and Ender are plotting to get Haseo in their party, but they're also kind of plotting to get Ovon's data because apparently something inside him is super important and we need to know why. So they're trying to avoid getting PK'd by Ender because she's always kind of fucking around with people. But they also want to get Haseo in their party, which leads into GU. Now later on, this whole thing ends up becoming a bit of a mess, and the early episodes are... The Twilight Brigade knows that Tan is in on them. And it's this struggle of how do we survive because we're not as powerful as Ender is and powerful as Tan is. But Shino's got a plan for it. And, you know, Tawalaya gets told about it and can't really do anything. So it becomes this big old mess, and the forums get a mess of, oh my god, the Twilight Brigade and Tan are fighting and all this shit. And turns out that Naobi and Ender get Ovon's attention and capture him, but in so doing end up revealing that Tan was involved in the shady dealings, like a black market dealer kind of thing. And all 3 of them kind of have to go their separate ways. Tawalaya gets like an episode later, but he ends up amounting to kind of Jack in the plot. Really, what ends up happening to Naobi and Ender reveals that they're the characters in GU that we care about. So they end up switching characters from Naobi and Ender, you know, these aggressive-looking people, to these more standoffish, important system administrators that they were. Ender still does her information dealing in the second part of the season, but now under this guise of Pi. And she plays a major role in the game, as does Yata. So Naobi and Ender become Yata and Pi. And it's strange because I think they were originally going to be certain characters, and then when the game got developed, they ended up becoming the actual characters in the game that they'd end up being, which is kind of striking to me, because as impressive a characters as they are in GU, as system administrators and people working for CC Corp, it's like, oh, I like them a lot better in their second forms because it just makes more sense, you know. I don't know if I would have responded to them as well if they'd maintained their original form. So it's kind of a weird disconnect because you see what is gonna be or could have been versus what in reality ends up happening in GU. So that first part of the season, those 10, 15 episodes or whatever, is Tan being a thing and then not being a thing anymore, and then everything kind of receding into the background. So, but then there's still 20-some episodes to go, which is, well, what the fuck? What ends up happening is Shino starts to kind of get, you know, bogged down by Haseo a little bit more and breaks her guard and says, hey, I've got, here's my phone number. I know you like me a little bit, so here you go. And then she calls him up. Unfortunately, she gets PK'd. We see this figure known as Tri-Edge, who looks like Kite from the original games. And the assumption is Haseo sees Shino get PK'd, but unlike normal PKs, if you get PK'd by this guy, you turn into a coma. So they're rehashing the original story from Dot Hack World 1 into a different form in GU. So the whole comas and the Lost One things returns. While I like that, I also don't, because what GU tends to do is retread the story arcs that they've done already. They do it better, and this at least gives you emotional weight now, because Shino's been this rock for Haseo for 10 episodes. Tabby's been kind of there. Saki just nopes out after a while. Ovan obviously is just doing his own fucking thing. When Shino gets fucked over, Haseo goes nuts. And you see this like 10 to 15 episode decline of, okay, I'm nuts. I don't know what the fuck. And he becomes totally unlikable. But at least now he has a justifiable reason for being this crazed, power-hungry psychopath. He's looking to destroy Tri-Edge, and that's where the game really starts. So you have to see Shino get lost in this to really give Haseo any weight in the games, because the anime doesn't really do it justice until 10 episodes in. But the problem is that, and we'll just get into the negatives now, Haseo is unlikable. He's virtually unlikable. It's just the nature of his character is he's unlikable. Not in the same way that Tsukasa was, because Tsukasa had this sort of depressed kind of like, why me, woe is me kind of vibe. Haseo is just Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. He's just an unlikable dick about everything. And outside of his interest in Shino, like, there's nothing grounding him in anything. He's not completely unlikable and will at least listen to people, but it's like, do I care about you? Really? I'd rather have Ender stab you or something, you know, that sort of thing. It's like, why would I follow you? So you're kind of like following along Shino and Tabby as the likable people, because everybody else is like 50 shades of fuck. And it's like Philo's sitting there and it's like, you like certain characters in the show, but Haseo as this linchpin viewpoint character doesn't really get a lot until that pivotal moment. But you have to get through those episodes to get to that point. But then, again, they have a lot more to go. And this is where the problem goes. I think this could have been like a 6-episode OVA and shortened the initial part of the show, gotten to the Shino stuff, and then spent 1 to 2 episodes getting to setting up GU and what Haseo has done to build power and shit. This is a 26-episode series. And even though they still focus on slow world building, and the world is fine, I suppose, and it's all the same stuff as Sign was, but the difference is, because nothing really happens that doesn't happen in GU, because it's building on characters you need to have in GU, you're still forced to watch this to see what Haseo and Yata and Pai specifically are doing. But what is Sakisaka doing here if he's not part of the game? What are these characters doing? And you see bit players here and there, and it's like, why is this character in here when he's not in the game? Why is this character in here when she's not in the game? You know, that sort of thing. And you're just like, 4 to 5 main characters in this show don't show up in this game at all. So you sit there and wonder, like, where did they go, though? Unlike Sign and the quadrilogy, where it's a whole new cast of characters, and you just assume that Sign is working on its own thing, and, well, okay, we'll compartmentalize it. Don't worry about it. We're not, outside of Helba, we're not focusing on any characters, you know. This is forcing you to watch the 3 or 4 main characters build their thing. Haseo, Shino, and Ovan specifically, plus Yata and Pai. And then everybody else is just like, well, I'm here for the anime, and then bye. So it's very long without too much payoff. Once you see Shino get PK'd, and once you see a couple episodes of Haseo going through his thing, you're kind of saying, okay, well, I've kind of seen everything. I don't really need to see the end of it. I stopped like 4 or 5 episodes before the end. I was just like, well, I know what's going on. I don't need to know this bullshit. I saw the main story beats. This could have been like a 6 to 12 episode show really snappy, really quick, and because they were focusing on a mystery rather than this slow build of these character dynamics at play, they tried to do dot hack sign over again and it didn't work. And because they had a less interesting main character, you don't really feel as impressed. That being said, you do still need to know the ties to the GU games. You still need to know the 4 to 5 characters that are important, and then the side characters you build upon. The world, it is the same. The world is the same, and they do at least show off some things from dot hack roots, so it's not completely unnecessary. It just feels slightly different. That being said, Shion's in a different franchise. Shino, Ovon, and Philo are great. And Tabby's fine, but she doesn't really do much. Those 3 are really the main reason why you'd want to watch the show, because they kind of inform like why Haseo is the way he is. And without that, you sit there and play the games and you're like, this guy's a fucking asshole. And with Roots, you at least understand the context as to why he's the way he is, because they have basically molded him to be the person he is. And then in GU, when you're going after Ovon a shit ton as one of the main villains, you're like, okay, I get why Haseo is so hung up on this guy, because he's hung up on Shino and he's hung up on Philo, trying to get him either in or out of the situation. So all of the ties into GU, for as much as I don't like Roots' length, makes sense. I do like the fact that the Viz dub is the way it is, because I don't hear these actors as much. So again, you get to hear different sides of things, and it's cool because these characters show up in the game as actors that I specifically know quite a bit, but it is cool to hear a different interpretation of them. Ovon is still very mysterious but charismatic. Shino is a lot more motherly, as opposed to in bit parts of GU, she's kind of sounds like a sister, because that's what the voice actor was going for. But it's like, that's what her voice would do more. In this, Shino gets a higher priority and higher pronounce, and the actress does a really good job. Kelly Sheridan, she was like Sango in Inuyasha, right? So it's like, you know that she has this firm grasp of being this pillar character. And if nothing else, Roots is what you need to get into GU. And I think it does a better job because some characters are directly tied into what GU does as a game, because it is a more character-focused game. I think the problem with the original quadrilogy was it was split. Dot Hack Sign was way better because it was a heavy focus on characters, but they didn't have anybody to ground you into the new game. So you were focusing on the game as the game. With Roots, despite my issues with it, you still need to know some story beats about it so that you at least give a shit that Haseo is going on this journey to find who PK Chino, why he's going this extra mile to find Ovon and, tell him you abandoned us, that sort of thing. Why Yata and Pai mean so much when they show up in the game. So there's still things that Roots does. Does it work as a show as well as Sign does? No, it doesn't. Because they spend way too long to get to the same conclusion that we're making a game, we're just giving you a world to inhabit. I still enjoyed the fact I watched it, but I don't know if it's as necessary as Sign is as an anime. It's more necessary as a companion piece to the material, but I don't know if it works as well as a show does. So getting to experience the show in an anime form is nice, but I don't think it's essential to GU, which we'll get to next week, because GU kind of solidifies the reason why I like Dot Hack. Sign was great, but as I said last week, the game part of the game was bleh. GU does a better job of explaining what Haseo and Ovon and Shino do, and getting to that point. There is a lot more going on in GU than anything else in the rest of the franchise. And that's why it's kind of considered the gold standard. Sign is there, but Roots, you could skip it. But GU, definitely not. GU was one of my favorite games in the PS2 era. I'm glad that they re-released it for the PS4, but I'll save that for next week. Going forward, out of the .hack universe, we're going to be doing some other things. I believe what I've scheduled is Toradora, which is an interesting situation in and of itself. I don't usually do harem shows, but hey, we're doing a harem show, yay! And we're doing one of the more popular ones. The next episode after Toradora is going to be a show or a game that I've neglected for a few weeks. Once I decided to do the .hack thing, I kind of put Metal Gear Solid on the back burner. But we're gonna do it. We're definitely gonna do it. And Metal Gear Solid is certainly its own thing. For better or for worse. And at least in terms of Metal Gear Solid, the franchise, the first one and the third one are really amazing. So I'm definitely going to enjoy talking about Metal Gear Solid. And going after that will be something a little more subdued and a change of pace. Because after Metal Gear, we're going to be talking about Emma, a Victorian Romance. Talking about slow-burning shows that are a lot of talking. Emma was a show about 15 years ago that I had gotten subbed version for a long time. I actually read the manga version more than anything else, but they finally dubbed it, and it was an interesting case of they kickstarted a dub for a show that was 15 years old. I don't think I'd ever seen that before in my life. They actually dubbed it with actors from New York, so talk about shows that get different actors here and there. And Emma is an interesting show because, again, it's a Victorian romance. It's exactly what it says it is, but it's a slight comedy / drama / rags to riches kind of romance story, and it's certainly a change of pace from a lot of the darker stuff that I've been doing. So I'll be happy to do all of those. But that'll do it for me. We're 3 weeks into .hack, and we'll finish it up next week. But that'll do it. I'll see you guys next week. Citizen Strife, signing off.